Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Today's session is being hosted jointly by Regional Development Australia, Logan and Redlands, and the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. Welcome on board, everyone. We've got people from around the world and around the country today joining us. I'll just give people a couple of seconds to join in the room. So I'd like to formally welcome everyone to the Innovation in Health and Social Care webinar held today, as I said, hosted by Regional Development Australia, Logan and Redlands, and the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. There is an audience today from around the world, and I welcome our international colleagues along with our national colleagues with every state and territory I think being represented, and many local providers. By way of introduction, I'm Anne Livingston. I'm a member of the committee of RDA, Redlands and Logan, and I'm also the chair of the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology. For the purposes of today, I will be a master of ceremonies for this event. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge a country. And I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land in which we each gather today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have joined us today and are providing some fabulous services around the country to older people and people with a disability in their particular areas. By way of housekeeping though, I'll just cover a few housekeeping issues. For the purposes of today's event and the recording being undertaken, your microphones have been muted, but don't let that stop you from formulating any questions during the event, and post them in the Q&A panel. We'll be moderating that panel during the sessions, and you can ask questions of the whole panel of presenters or individual presenters. If you have any technical issues or concerns during the webinar, again, post any of these in the Q&A session, and the technical team behind us will be able to resolve those issues. As I mentioned, the session is being recorded and will be made available in the future on the various websites from panel members, and you may be able to access and share it with your particular other people in your organisation. So by way of overview of today, we're going to have a look at some of the local issues, and I'm going to welcome shortly Gary Hargroves, the Chair of Regional Development Australia, to talk about these issues shortly. We're going to introduce a renowned researcher who's been doing some leading edge reviews and investigations into the impact of innovation. And then I'm going to join you for some insights into aged and community care. We're going to finish up today right on time with a Q&A session. So think of your questions early and get them posted early so we can ensure that they're being answered. So it's my privilege to introduce our first speaker for today. Welcome Gary, the Honourable Gary Hargroves, who is the Chair of Regional Development Australia, Logan and Redlands. So welcome Gary, and thank you for joining us today. So Gary, you just need to unmute yourself. One of the problems with Skyping these days, and we'll get to commence. Perfect, Gary. Thank you.
Terrific. And yet I gave the best part of my speech already, so there we are. But Anne, thanks very much for your introduction and indeed the opportunity to participate in this webinar. Logan and Redlands, let me tell you a bit about that, and then I'll tell you a bit about Regional Development Australia, or maybe I'll flip it around the other way. Regional Development Australia was established by the Australian government, works across 50+ regions in various parts of this massive nation. Some regions obviously larger than others, but it's all about economic and employment growth, development, looking at the issues, trying to facilitate the dialogue between various state levels, the private sector and the community sector, to create economic opportunity and develop new jobs, to try and get ahead, if you like, of the tide we all know that is coming in various sectors. In the case of Logan and Redlands, it's a fairly bespoke area to the south of Brisbane. It's between Brisbane and the Gold Coast, so it sits between the two 800-pound gorillas of the southeast Queensland corner. But Logan and Redlands, we believe, is the centre of economic and employment growth for southeast Queensland, and indeed for Queensland, and in fact, I think for the whole of Australia. And there's a number of reasons why, and already, despite very low levels of resourcing for infrastructure, key infrastructure, community infrastructure, and indeed even basic infrastructure such as proper roads and rail services, not much has been spent through the area really for most of this last 100 years. Logan and Redlands has, through private sector investment, become the centre of logistics, at the very epicentre of the transport tasks of southeast Queensland. And so a lot of pressure, we believe, is now on governments, federal and state, to not just simply facilitate road and rail that travels through the district, but actually travels across the district, to better connect from the western part of the Greater Brisbane area, from Ipswich and through to Toowoomba, through to the eastern part of Greater Brisbane, the Moreton Bay Islands and the Redlands coast, and through that, through the city of Logan. So imagine, if you would, the way Western Sydney was 25 years ago. That is kind of where Logan and Redlands is now. So there's emerging physical infrastructure challenges, a very culturally and linguistically diverse community, particularly in Logan, where a lot of people with startup ambitions, new to Australia, who've come resourced only through government and community charity organisations, trying to make their way, trying to get the dignity of doing, getting their first job, getting the opportunity to have the life they wanted in this country of ours. Many from very strong refugee backgrounds, people who have been hurt by their country of birth, who've fled and have been able to find sanctuary here. And nobody migrates from one country to another to go backwards. So they have a personal energy and a strong ambition to do well. So part of the task in Logan and Redlands is to provide the community infrastructure and indeed the opportunities for education, to give people those chances to participate as fully as they wish in our Australian economy. Some of them come with medical skills, paraprofessional medical skills, as well as other paraprofessions. Some of them have been professionals in their original country, but their skills aren't readily or easily organised or recognised here in Australia. So part of the frustration is to get people who have got greater capacity but only take on entry-level jobs. And I'm not just talking about those who drive our cabs, I'm talking about people who wash the plates and the dishes and clean up after others in hospitality and indeed in hospitals and aged care facilities, to get them to actually have their skills geared up so they can participate more broadly across our economy. Now, this is what we hope for. This is what we hope will be the case for these people. But of course, if there isn't the resourcing, the effort put into providing education for them, then there's going to be a series of problems down the track. And so as Western Sydney is now getting a lot of infrastructure development in there, and a lot of social issues are being dealt with, I think the same thing is going to happen across Logan and Redlands. Logan and Redlands as a region has also a very ageing population, as indeed all of Australia has. It also still has a major task and a major ask when it comes to the business of aged care and indeed disability service support. And so, as I said, the description of some of those people in the workforce who would like to be further involved in the workforce, absolutely critical in an ageing workplace environment. The massive workforce of our aged care and social care sector is ageing. We all know that, everybody knows that. And so recognising that and driving that equation to try and bring the age down by encouraging younger people to get involved, do things that can make a difference for themselves and indeed the broader community, I think is a key part of what we're trying to do. So from a Logan and Redlands RDA perspective, we've identified that not only is this physical infrastructure needing to be built to get people across the regions, but also recognition of the sort of skills in emerging sectors. And the NDIS is very much so a part of that, as indeed is aged care, as indeed it should be. But it is about attracting younger people into these tasks. This is not an easy thing, so it revolves around a lot of affiliations and affirmation with organisations such as those who are listening today online to try and build some of those partnerships that are absolutely critical for the way forward. But look, we see this sector, the aged care, the community care sector, as a major employment grower through Redlands and Logan, a generator of jobs, a generator of economic prosperity, which requires, as I said, a lot of back of house assistance to further add to the task. So for all of those reasons, we're delighted to be associated with this. We think it's an important conversation that is being had here today to suggest that in the area of aged care and indeed in disability care and community care generally, that it is simply a charitable pursuit. While it may well define some of the ambitions of many in the workforce, there is indeed money to be made, there is indeed an economy to be grown, there is indeed resources to be furnished, which in itself provides that back of house kind of growth in economic activity. This is an economic driver, and we've got to see it in that way. And like any economic driver, any early investment properly targeted is going to grow the economy, grow the outcome, grow the jobs, and grow the overarching wealth of an area. I don't want to just simply put dollar values on this, because I think we also obviously have an enormous and passionate commitment to look after the older people in our community, because unfortunately, no matter what we try and do, we're all heading in that particular direction as well. And I must say, one of the other lessons we've learned from some of our culturally and linguistically community, including First Australians, is this absolute commitment to caring as a family, first and foremost. And so one of the issues we've identified is an unrealised absolute when it comes to how many people are needing this help. A lot of families do it first. A lot of families don't turn to others. A lot of families don't turn to community. A lot of families don't turn to the corporate sector that provide these services. And so part of the work we've been doing and wanting to do more of is to try and, for want of a better term, flush out the real need in these areas. Because as I said, if we're meeting the expectation of the area, there's an economic driver. If we're not meeting the full expectation, having the full numbers and the real picture, then perhaps we're not having the full-blown economic benefit for the broader community. So there should be no resentment. There should be great ambition about this sector. And from an RDA point of view, we're going to continue to do that, working with councils, working with state government, working with the Australian government to try and drive this debate in this proper direction. So, and I'm pretty upbeat, optimistic about where this will go and what we need to do, but heaven help us if we don't, because we then will have a very heartless and cruel outcome. We're also robbing ourselves as an opportunity to do better. Obviously, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 period we've been through has been incredibly frustrating for many people across this sector and across all sectors. And the hurt that's amongst many older Australians and many already socially isolated people who, because of disabilities, can't get out and about as much as they'd like, is real and raw and understood by many of us. So I think it's important that we have a proper conversation about the real needs, the full range of the needs, the full numbers of people in the needs, and encourage as many participants as possible, including, as I said, the private sector, to play a strong and positive role. The backups start for a lot of other industries, be it food supply, be it cleaning supply, be it logistics, be it transport, is real. But it does frustrate me, and I'll finish on this note, when I look at some of the infrastructure, when I realise that people with disabilities in places like the Redlands and people who are older in places like the Redlands, but also in great parts of Logan where they have a large land mass but small rate base, no real positive government investment from the state level into building the core infrastructure we take for granted, sewerage, water supply, and indeed even the telecommunications stuff from the federal point of view is pretty ordinary across Logan and Redlands. I find it frustrating to think that people who want to get on public transport, of which there's just scarce amounts of it, have to use their ingenuity to get across 2-inch gravel, 50 mil gravel, the sort of stuff you make roads out of, still lying around on the side of roads without formed curbs, without proper bus stops, without adequate train services. If you want to go from one part of Redlands to a part of Logan, you've got to go into the middle of Brisbane to change a train to come back out into Logan. This is woeful in 2020. With rail services basically the same as they were in the 1880s through this area, public transport is woeful. And I think it's having a dramatic impact on the potential of people who want to go and do more in the economy, including those who are disabled, those who are older but still want to work or do things. So I think there's a real need for the big built economy, the built infrastructure part of the economy that's got to be invested in. I won't walk away from that case, but secondly, I also think the softer side of it, the skills that are needed to provide the services that are wanted, absolutely critical. So I wish everybody well with the deliberations today and look forward to further speakers. Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you very much, Gary. Great introduction to both, I guess, the local and regional issues for us, but also the national issues that we're facing in the midst of the Royal Commission and the issues for services across aged care and disability. Thank you, Gary, and it's great that you're going to join us later for some questions. So I remind people to put their questions in the Q&A panel. So it is my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Rita de Villas-Skippers, who's a Senior Lecturer in Entrepreneurship and Innovation Management at the University of Sunshine Coast. We've been following Rita's work, fantastic groundbreaking work around measuring the impact of innovation. And she's going to talk through her research and opportunities for future endeavours. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for you and the RDA team from Logan and Redlands for inviting me today to speak to the audience on this very important topic. I might just introduce myself a little bit. I'm a lecturer and a researcher in the area of entrepreneurship, and have been really fascinated by how people make decisions around things that are risky and novel, how to embrace that sort of from the personal perspective, but also then how does this happen in organizations. And in the last couple of years, I've been highly engaged in the Sunshine Coast community, where we've done a report to understand the Sunshine Coast as a whole, in terms of how the innovation works and the different parties that work together to enable that. And then relatively recently, I guess, from a research perspective recently, but probably not from a monthly perspective, but we've got a 3-year study with the Sunshine Coast Regional Innovation Project team, which is called the Regional Innovation Benchmark. And really what I'm still interested in the same issues about how do we bring innovation about, but I guess it sort of moved from the individual to the how do businesses and organizations innovate, and then how does this look across a networked ecosystem of providers. So I just thought I might kick off. An esteemed colleague said to me, you can't have any webinar without some COVID questions. So let's go to the first poll. I just like to test the waters with you guys and see how you've been going the last couple of days. So if we can have the first poll launched. You should see the poll come up on your screen now. First question, what's your favorite location to work from? Let's flush that out. I see we've got a couple of international attendees and potentially people from Victoria as well. And then the COVID pandemic has led us and our organization to reconsider our options, adapt the way we do things, or innovate our products and services. Right, how are we going with the completion of that? If Georgie in the background, if you're ready, you can show us those results. All right, we see the majority of us have been enjoying working from home. A couple of people have got out to the cafes and the beaches. Maybe these are some of people based around Queensland, a little bit more in the regional areas, or South Australia that's been doing well. And then what we see, the COVID pandemic has really massively impacted all of us to adapt the way we do things. So if we, taking that poll into account, we move on to the next slide. Today, I'd really like to talk to you about what we see innovation and how this influences our community. And I'm using the Regional Innovation Benchmark Studies findings that have been released yesterday. And I would like all of you to see this almost as a regional case study of how businesses in a community work. And then a little bit later, as I continue with the presentation, I'll draw this back to how regions think about this and how age and community care might use these findings to think about how to address some of the challenges in the future. So I just want to say on the next slide, this particular regional project, the Regional Innovation Benchmark on the Sunshine Coast, was funded by Advance Queensland. In our state of Queensland, we've had the Queensland government do something quite different, I guess, in the last couple of years, in that all the different regions, non-metropolitan regions, were able to bring a consortium of different groups together who said we want to work on innovation in our region with matched funding. And then projects have been put in place, and the study that I'm telling you about is to measure the outcomes of those projects. So if you look at this, it's really an ambition of projects that's been led by a core group, the council, the RDA, Noosa Council, Sun Central, the Innovation Centre, Sunshine Coast, Innovate Noosa, and Telstra as a group, to bring a number of projects off the table. And what we've really done is measured the impact of that. All right, so that's just the background of this particular findings. So if we move to the next slide, the benchmarking process is what we followed in our particular case, because the Sunshine Coast Project Innovation Team had some outcomes that they wanted to achieve. In the studies we've done previously, before this innovation funding kicked off, we knew that the region had a couple of pockets of innovators, but most small businesses in the region didn't really engage with this whole innovation agenda. So the issue for them was really, how do we make innovation mainstream and have a lot of businesses and even larger organizations? And Gary talked about how sometimes non-profits and people in social and community care may not engage with this dialogue. So how do we bring everybody into this conversation together? So they launched a number of projects, and our benchmarking process was then to measure how this actually had an impact on organizations. So we measured how firms saw their own innovation using a rigorous methodology that's supported by the OECD measures around innovation. And we asked businesses themselves, from businesses that were 1 year old up until 70, 80 years old, so sort of family businesses, ask them annually about their innovation activities, analyze this, and then we share in forums like these and also in our community, what did we learn from our research, and now what is it that we can do next based on this. So if we go to the next slide, just where's the data coming from? In our data that this report's particularly based on, we now have a data set of 2,053 firms, which is based on data that we've collected. We had a benchmark base year of Australia and Queensland firms that we compare against. We collected data in 2018, 2019, and again 2019, 2020. And that's where we've got really a broad base of firm data to compare what we find in the region per year against. In this particular report, we also developed case studies around how businesses collaborate on innovation, and we also consult a number of secondary documents. So if we move to the next slide, the issue is really, before we delve in too deeply, I wanted to get an idea of what the audience is thinking, what is innovation, what they would consider innovation. So if we launch the next poll, if you can give us an example of what you think might be an innovation that you've seen recently. And then the second question asks, what is Australia internationally highly rated for in terms of innovation? Is this in the product or service space, in the process space, methods, or business practices? All right, I think that should give everybody enough time. You ready with the results of that poll?
Rita, we've got a few more people just needing a little bit of time to fill that out.
Okay, no worries, Anne.
If we could just give them another minute or so.
Sure.
And just remind people that to fill it out in the online. Very easy, just tick the boxes and we're good to go. Georgie, we're good to go. Thank you.
All right, this is great. Thanks everybody for participating. People saying that it's a good idea to convert beer to hand sanitizer, given that we've not been able to get out and about as much, and at least we're not, that's not resulting in waste. I generated these examples from a presentation I was holding yesterday, and this morning I realized probably in health and social care I could have had some other examples. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is often innovations are things that are actually all around us, so when we get used to them, we may not see them as innovations. Yet if you do something for the first time yourself or as an organization, that's really when you realize how hard it is, and you have to learn and make that part of your processes. So that is actually really important from an organizational point of view, to recognize that as innovations. And hopefully we will be having more virtual reality meetings in future, where we can walk around and have our avatars meet and not have to sit stationary in front of Zoom for endless meetings in future. So interesting to see the responses to question 2. I think it's, if we look at Australia overall as a country and we compare ourselves against Switzerland, Singapore, the US, Australia actually shows up that much more highly rated in process innovation, which you might find surprising, but it's often not in our experience. A lot of our large companies in Australia that are more in the mining sector actually have massive innovations. But what this demonstrates is that really products and service innovations are what we're most exposed to, and that's a lot of times what happens in smaller businesses. But process innovations and methods innovations and business practice innovations happens behind the scenes, that are a critical part of what is necessary to continually adapt and change, but we sometimes don't quite recognize that. So if we move on to the next slide, in terms of what is innovation, when we ask people in the survey about their innovation, we actually ask them to tell us about their innovation in terms of how new it is, and also if in which of these categories, like you guys have just indicated, in which categories it might fall. So in terms of the novelty of innovation, I want to explain this because the findings are organized in that way to follow, is that firms may not innovate at all, or they may implement different things that might be new to them. Let's say a restaurant that's changed its kitchen to delivering meals, or family meals that now only used to take walk-in business, and now they might take orders over the phone or through a website. What they're implementing there as a consumer, we might not find that particularly new, but that specific business have to put a lot of new systems and processes in place to enable that to take place. So something like using an online shop, or bringing in a different form of care to what's been happening before, and like many of you indicated, those adaptations is what we might be classifying as incremental innovation. And then we see some innovations that are very new, might be new to the business, but actually might be new to the industry. So there is no existing models of how to do this, and you have to almost create those models, teach consumers, and set up systems in the business and also the industry to make those innovations work. So for example, blockchain is a software that's sort of being initially used in the financial services industry, but if we move that over to legal and contracts and medical records, that might be quite new to the industry, so it might take a lot of time for those innovations to spread and be adopted across the whole industry. And then in the survey, when we ask people about innovation, we ask them, like I asked you, to tell us whether that innovation that they instituted was sort of in products or services or in processes. So this may be updating knowledge, routines, or different engineering workflow processes. Methods might be a new delivery or production method, or business practices is, well, like many of us and many organizations this year having to work from home, or a change in the whole human resource practices, changes in the IT delivery, but also changes in marketing. New media are regarded as business practices. So if we asked these businesses on the Sunshine Coast about their innovation, and if we move on to the next slide, you'll be able to see we first, through our analysis, we balance the sample out so that it looks like the ABS data, that we can have something comparable. And then we're able to aggregate responses, and really we have divided first just the groups into two groups, the non-innovators and the innovators. And in this case, like I said, you can think about the Sunshine Coast really representing a region like Logan or Redlands, and then we compare this against how a state, Queensland, and how we're doing relatively to Australia. So in the case of the Regional Innovation Project team on the Sunshine Coast, wanted to know how regional businesses in the Sunshine Coast was doing relative to the state and Australian averages. And really what we see there is this pattern of there's probably 30 to 40% of businesses that are non-innovators, and then the majority, 60 to 70% of businesses are in this innovator category. So if we break that up a little bit further on the next slide, I talked about this incremental or new to the firm innovation and radical innovation. The bars, the blue is the Australian, maroon or red being Queensland, green Sunshine Coast data for this year, and yellow Sunshine Coast data for the previous year. But really what this slide demonstrates is when you look at the novelty of innovation, most of the firm innovation in our regional area was really happening in terms of these adapting technologies. And that makes a lot of sense, because bringing new technologies and business practices and products and ways of working into the business is a way to create more value for the customer at a relatively low cost, if we take into account that most of the firms in this region are micro and small firms, bringing more value to customers at a relatively low risk to the businesses. These innovations will easily be taken on board by customers, and these really new to the firm and industry radical type of innovations that take a lot longer time to realize a return is less frequent in terms of the total innovations that's out there. And if we move to the next slide, often what we think about is digital practices are often some of the business practices that firms adopt. And in fact, in our survey this year, we saw that innovators, 100% of them reported having an innovation strategy, having a website, using social media, and using their platform for trading. And in fact, this was up in our survey from around 70 to 80% in 2019 of what firms reported they did in 2018. So we see this gradual adoption of digital becoming, and firms becoming a lot more digitally literate, especially among small innovative firms. And these firms are eager to learn. And in the case of a shock like the pandemic, these firms were definitely better off to respond to these kind of shocks in the economy than firms that were not adopting these digital practices. So if we move on to the next slide, the question is really, where do firms get their ideas for innovation from? And of course, there's a lot of sources, and the most common ones, as you would think, very obvious, is from within the firm and from clients of the firm, often from suppliers that make some suggestions, from what businesses read online. This year, we saw a big increase in ideas from financiers, and that's probably because a lot of firms turn to their accountants and to ask, and kind of get information in that way, and also from looking at competitors. And then if we can just have the click on the slide. What makes a real difference to business innovation is actually drawing innovation from knowledge-based sources. And these professional conferences, government research and research institutes, trade associations, and patents and universities are those knowledge-based sources that give firms a real advantage. So we want to be encouraging regional firms to really use more of that. And that's why community care that Anne is extensively involved in, who really encourage the flow of information onto smaller firms in the region, is critical to cultivate high value sort of innovation that has a competitive advantage within regions that will lead to that job creation that Gary spoke of in the beginning. So if we move on to the next slide, you might be going, well, what is the best way then? What am I actually saying to you? So what I really want to say is there is no one size fits all. What I really would like to say is we need a portfolio approach when we think about innovation in our communities. And I've just drawn this illustration or graphic from the US Agency for International Development, who's classified innovations in terms of their impact and feasibility, but saying that you can, as a region, actually have a look at all of the different innovations that's happening and saying, look, what are the things that we might be able to bring about quickly that has some quick wins and that will have a lot of impact? What are the things to incrementally improve? Where do we need to invest in future? And of all of the ideas that we've come up, perhaps there are things that might be low priorities if we look at them in terms of their feasibility and impact. So really, if we're looking overall at aged care or innovation in aged care, it's not really one type of innovation that we want. We want a combination and a portfolio approach of different innovations that will deliver benefit. Because as Gary rightly said, we're all getting older. It's inevitable whether we want to face it or not. So if we move on to the next slide, I'd like to launch the last poll. And this question is about collaboration. So the question is quite simple. Are you considering collaborating with another business in the next month? And you don't have to say yes or no, you can be unsure. All right, so we're good to see a lot of people in the audience who are quite collaborative. That's really important because the next topic in that I'd like to talk about is collaboration. So you can close that poll out. In fact, on a KPMG study on innovation in aged services, one of the key issues that was highlighted, one of the barriers facing innovation in aged care was the fact that it is so challenging to collaborate as there are so many different providers. And what the data shows that we collected over the time period that I'm talking about is you will see that it is very challenging to collaborate. Very few businesses are keen on collaborating. And this is more prevalent among non-innovators than innovators. But even among innovators, really less than a third of businesses collaborate. And we've just seen a slight uptick on the Sunshine Coast in this area because we've really been pushing that message and sharing lessons of successful collaborations and what is it that makes collaborations work. So on the next slide, why would firms collaborate? Well, the benefits that they realize from this is actually might be quite surprising. So for many small firms that don't have a lot of opportunity and a lot of diversity of staff in their teams, working with another business is a great way to assist managers, but also develop staff and develop the potential of staff as they are engaging in really kind of challenging new projects. It gives them access to new markets because they have potentially access to a different market because of the business they're collaborating with. They're able to offer a wider choice to their customers. They find that, especially for small firms, they don't have to do all of these tasks themselves, and then can develop products and services and improve financial credibility. So I've just seen a question pop up, and I'm going to answer that in a little bit. So just to say that we will get back to that question in a little while, but thank you for asking that. So if we move on to the next one, the next slide. In our case study and report, we did a lot of collaborative cases. And so we have got quite a lot of lessons we learned from that on the next slide. So the sort of businesses we had in our case study, some were in the smart city area. So they're trying to create a whole new industry. Some are in sustainability, and some are in the creative industries. So they're not in aged care specifically, but I will get to the aged care sector if you just bear with me for 5 minutes. So I think these lessons that we learned from our case studies are transferable to the aged care sector as well. The first thing is to realize that, which businesses who collaborate realize, is what they are chasing and what they're trying to do in innovation is so big, they can't do it alone. So they find themselves able to actually achieve these ambitious goals if they are finding their values align and they can work together and they see a way for their skills to complement each other. So if they can spell out the expectations of both parties and still remain flexible and adaptable in the process, willing to experiment, in other words, launch a trial, see how that trial works, and then iterate and learn from that, frequently communicate, and build long-term trusting relationships. These are the things that really make collaboration work. So now I'm moving on to the innovation in health and social care, which is some questions that have come up. I might be addressing some of that in the next one. So I found this really fantastic report, and I guess the great news is when we're looking for ideas in Australia, there's been a lot of work done in Europe around aging, because of course we face very similar issues around aging population. And the Agile Aging Alliance has put out a large number of reports based on their experience with having more than 34 organizations across 14 countries collaborate and put ideas together on how to bring about innovation in health and social care. And from their work, I've really generated the next, they've inspired me to generate the next slide. There is, when we look at how do we live better in age and social care, we really need to bring a lot of different sectors together, because the problems that we face are in essence what we call wicked problems or complex problems. They are not just solved by one sector or focusing on one thing. And that's really the biggest challenge around some of the government funding that comes out, is that it's quite sector focused and that it's not really broad-based focus. But what we need is this integrated collaboration, because if we are going to have people live in their homes for longer, we need people who are working in the housing market. Houses need to be adapted or changed. So we're asking, how do future homes look, which involve architects, construction, building materials, in the design. It looks at transport, how we are able to move people from their housing to access services. We're talking about how we bring in the financial sector and how do we develop business models that really enable the sort of innovation that we need in age and social care. We've seen a big change in Australia in the NDIS. So how do we now follow with more consumer-led focus and to see the promise of the silver economy and how to finance changes here. Sorry, we're still on the previous slide. Talking about all the different sectors that can get involved in health and wealth and care. The design, how do we design for ability rather than disability? It's just a different way of framing a problem, but it enables us to look at the user-centered design model. And how do we think of aging as what kind of platforms we might put in place to bring a lot of different providers together. And then around technology, you must have seen examples of innovation in smart homes, software and digital enablement, which is something I believe Anne will talk a little bit later. And I've seen the most amazing robot carers and puppies, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation. But what we really need is this ecosystem or a networked approach to address some of the challenges that we see in age and social care. So now we can move on to the next slide, which I promise I'm getting close to the end of my presentation now. So why should businesses or organizations really care about innovation? Well, we do know it makes a massive difference to their financial performance. So actually it's not that difficult to convince businesses to get on board and start innovating in aged care. But KPMG Australia did bring together a round table of a number of organizations from InnovAging last year. And they outlined that when we are looking at aged care and social care to innovate in that, we've got such a lot of stakeholders. We need to bring them together to set a strategic vision for the industry, to increase industry connectivity and cooperation, to align and really focus on the needs, as Gary has spoken, of what older Australians or people that live with different disabilities and social isolation challenges, how to work beyond that, and that we need a different model of care really, and to know how to incentivize that from an investment perspective. So I think there are ways to move forward with this. And that, if we move on to the next slide, I think we've had a number of questions. So thank the audience for their questions, but we will answer all the questions that have been asked in the panel session after Anne's presentation.
Thank you, Rita. Great presentation. And we've got a number of questions now on the chat pane. I encourage people to continue to add to those. But we've also received a number of questions offline. So keep your questions flowing and we'll make sure that we attempt to get to all of them. So it's my opportunity now, or challenge, to bring this all together in respect to what this means to age and community care. I'm going to wear a couple of hats in this. My role as chair of the Home Care Committee for the Australian Aged Care Industry Technology Council, and I acknowledge my colleagues who are on the line today, Dr. George Mangelis, the chair of the Australian Aged Care Industry Technology Council, and Mr. Rod Young, who's chair of the ITAC committee, which looks at innovation and technology across the care spectrum. I also chair the state government funded Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, and I have a day job, and I'll talk about a few projects that we're doing with local impact. So it's my role, I guess, to bring a couple of perspectives and lenses to talk about some of those recent projects, but also to talk about a bit of a way forward and how we can capitalise on some new futures for the sector. I'm going to talk about a specific range of services and projects, as well as an industry-wide perspective in terms of the range of projects that we're undertaking, and encourage everyone to think about innovation and, as Rita was indicating, more collaborative issues. So from our experience in the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, there's a range of lessons that we've learnt. The collaborative was established in 2015 with some government funding, and it was on the back of a statewide tour that we've been looking around the state at the positioning of the aged and community care sector, particularly a focus on community care providers across what was then the HAC, the Home and Community Care Program, and Packaged Care, now CHSP, Disability Services under NDIS, and also community care services funded by the federal government. We put, as a result of that somewhat, I think it was about 7 years of statewide discovery and talking to providers in every corner of the state, talking to rural providers, metropolitan providers, and also regional providers about how they were positioned around innovation and technology. We went to government and talked about the need to establish a collaborative community of practice to really promote the role innovation and technology could play in the future of delivery of community care, but also to recognise and identify how the sector needed to, I guess, take up challenges to improve the service and the quality that was being offered. Today, the collaborative has over 1,600 members, and we know many of those are large organisations. So in fact, they're not people as such, many of them are organisations in their own right. We know that although we're funded by the Queensland Government, in their wisdom, we were also able to canvass nationally and internationally. And we have a range of colleagues that have joined us today from collaborations that have occurred because of their involvement with our online community of practice. And we estimate at the moment about $28 million worth of funding has emerged from partnerships. So that's a great degree of activity and potential opportunities for new approaches that has emerged really because of innovative collaborations through this community of practice. I just wanted to highlight a couple of projects that specifically are being undertaken by the Aged Care Industry Information Technology Council, and as I acknowledged, Dr. George Mangelis is the chair of that council. The council was established in 2007 with a real intent to work collaboratively and cooperatively on issues regarding the uptake of innovation and technology across residential care, community care, and indeed housing for older people through retirement living and supported housing. Really our focus over the last 5 or 6 years has been really to promote research and to back those entities that are undertaking robust research, but also to undertake our own research. So I'm going to highlight a couple of the research endeavours that we've been undertaking. If you haven't already accessed our landmark publication to technology and innovation roadmap, it was launched in 2007 by the then Minister of Aged Care. It makes some 24 recommendations, and we've been working with the government and also with the Royal Commission around those recommendations. The research identified key issues for the sector and key opportunities where innovation and technology would help to improve the quality of service provision. We also, as a result of that, have launched a real collaborative effort internationally, looking at other countries and their experiences with doing similar activities and creating roadmaps for aged and community care. But I just highlight particularly a couple of colleagues who are online today. Professor Malcolm Fisk from Wales, who has collaborated on a number of publications comparing roadmaps from Ireland and England, and also Professor Gregory Alexander from the USA, who's led some really landmark studies in Australia as part of his Fulbright scholarship, looking at the role technology will play, particularly in improving the quality and consistency of service provision. But we've undertaken a fairly recent research that was released in late November, where we looked at what the research and evidence was indicating of impactful and meaningful and quality improvement that was being sought and realised from technology and innovation. And really we looked at where we left off from the roadmap, and we reviewed all the literature, both academic and grey literature, to, I guess, detail and discover for the sector what are the key impactful technologies and innovation that may make a difference. We know that this publication has been widely used. It's been used for organisations who are starting their journey on investing in innovation and technology, to those who are well advanced and using it to, I guess, strategically benchmark what they are doing. It's a great publication. I think it's really a meaningful and translatable publication, and really the Council has done a lot of work which is freely available to the sector to use. In this work, we've identified a range of innovations, but also the success and failures that those innovations might mean. But the most recent research that we've undertaken with the Australian Aged Care Industry Technology Council is the Aged and Community Care Innovation and Technology Capabilities and Readiness Survey, or we shorten that to Care IT Survey. This research was commissioned by the Commonwealth Department of Health and looked at a range of innovations and explored their application. In particular, we looked at the business to administrative systems and the business to government reporting. Those providers online would probably all agree that the streamlining of reporting and access to online government portals is a really important part of the equation today to help services be more effective and efficient. And we explored and really determined, I guess, and displayed how much resources is being used when there's not integration and streamlining of that. And we also looked at 3 distinct technology areas: surveillance and monitoring, telehealth and telecare. Importantly to note, we were funded in a non-COVID environment, and we had to quickly change our focus when the universal announcement of telehealth was made during the first weeks of our project being undertaken. And we, I guess, found a lot of information about early adoption and the challenges, but also the opportunities for providers to really adopt and adapt with what is really user-friendly technology these days. And we lastly looked at a whole range of technologies broadly defined as those technologies that would assist an older person or a person with disabilities to remain safe and secure in their environment, whether it be in home or in residential or other housing options. So what did we find? We're yet to release the whole of the report, but we did survey 421 participants from both the industry across a range of portfolio responsibilities, from residential care, as I mentioned before, through to community to more independent living. And we also tailor-made some surveys to really capture both the industry views, but the capabilities and positioning of the vendor community to help the sector respond. We had a highly representative group representing some 661,000 consumers and a workforce, both voluntary and paid workforce, of over 120,000. We also identified as part of this that there were 420 unique vendor solutions that the sector is using, and that provides some challenge about consistency of approach. So this report has not been released as yet, and we're hoping to bring this to launch shortly. The Council has also been working really hard with the newly established, or a couple of years into the making of, a digital health cooperative research centre. We're very active members of the Advancing Digital Health in Aged Care group, and this provides a unique partnership with Aged and Community Services Australia and the Guild, representing some of the largest providers in the country and all of the not-for-profit sector in Australia. And we're particularly looking at a range of issues and focuses on the options and the opportunities that digital health and care will provide for our sector. One of the great things that we're doing at the moment is exploring the business and research requirements to introduce a national network of living labs, and we're doing extensive work with Swinburne University to look at international experiences, to share the lessons learned and to build the capability and capacity of innovation throughout the sector. But locally, I just wanted to talk about a couple of projects that we've been involved in at both local, state and indeed at a federal level. And these are ones that specifically focused on the Redlands and Logan area. So we've just completed a cooperative project with a number of agencies, including Redlands District Council on the Ageing and Redlands City Council, looking at the issue of ageing innovatively on island communities. This is on the back of several work that we've been involved in successfully ageing on island communities internationally. And a number of colleagues have been working on the issues related to trying to maintain living on some very isolated communities, or some like in the Southern Moreton Bay Islands that may only be 20 minutes away from the mainland but have significant issues around ageing in place. And technology has the opportunity to play a vital role in supporting these people, but we're also been focused on the digital literacy issues for both workforce and client groups. We are also working on a current project which is looking at trialling a number of emerging technologies, and that's being funded by the Queensland government, and really looking at the support of older people and people with disabilities, particularly when emergencies occur in their lives. And those emergencies can be the COVID outbreak, can also be those issues that affect a person's ability to maintain living independently in their own home. Those trials are just about to take off in both Logan region and specifically on Moreton Bay, Southern Moreton Bay Islands. And we'll hopefully be able to report outcomes on those shortly. We've also been actively involved on the Advanced Queensland agenda. I myself is an Advanced Queensland digital champion and have some statewide ambitions or mission to improve the digital literacy and maturity of health and community care across the state. But we've also been working in the Advanced Queensland Regional Innovation Project, which Rita indicated her involvement in the Sunshine Coast area. The Redlands and Logan Regional Innovation Program is just about wrapping up, and that's been a 3-year project looking at supporting and enhancing innovation. A particular role that we've taken there is using some of the benchmarking tools that the Queensland Government has developed through Advanced Queensland and applying those to community care sector, and hopefully over time being able to provide information about the benchmarking of the sector regionally across these 2 regions, but also comparing it with other businesses as well as comparing over the years. We've also been working on a number of federally focused projects, including the application of a range of smart home technologies in a range of home care settings. We've been working with a number of providers around increasing their digital maturity of both their organisations and their workforces. And we've been particularly working with some special needs groups around the uptake of innovation and technology, but when those groups are perhaps isolated or choose not to access mainstream services, the role that new technologies and personalised technologies might play. And underpinning that is the role that co-design will play in the future, both of service provision and in the new workforces that are required. So where do we go next? I guess this collaborative webinar provides great opportunities for more collaboration. We really do want to stimulate a discussion and undertake some really practical, impactful projects and research within Logan and Redlands. And I guess it's the potential that Gary highlighted of economic development opportunities regionally, where we can, I guess, solve or provide some service supports or equipment or new technologies into the 2 regions that RDA here are interested in, but also the opportunities to export that knowledge and those endeavours both nationally and internationally. So please get involved. We've put out an expression of interest following this this webinar with also an evaluation for this webinar. So my contact's on the display there now, and we're going to move now into a Q&A panel. So I'll ask Gary and Rita to rejoin us. And so we're just waiting for Gary to rejoin us, and I've got a number of questions to start. So welcome, Gary. You're still on mute.
I've got that off now. There you go. There we are. Fine.
There you go. I am going to ask the first question of you, Gary. It's from Sam. Sam's a regular person on our Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative.
Yep.
And he's really interested in the role that Regional Development Australia will play in this region in ensuring that Redlands and Logan has a vibrant community and economy within the aged and community care industry?
Well, look, Anne, I think it's, and thanks, Sam, for the question. I think it's a question of continuing the work that RDA is meant to do. Unfortunately, we don't come with millions of dollars worth of grant monies to muscle our way in and cause things to happen. Our job is to collaborate and indeed to communicate with various stakeholders to get an opinion and to pass it forward. And as a group of people, the RDA draws on people from a variety of different sectors, some heavy industry, some from the aged care sector, such as Anne and at least one other. Others who are involved very much so in the suburban space and understanding the way our suburbs work and the various infrastructure. The fact that we hear all these one-liners about 20-minute cities and 15-minute drives and 25-minute commutes and all this sort of stuff. But the simple reality is, in this great band of suburbs across the southern half of Brisbane, Logan and Redlands, between Gold Coast and Brisbane, the getting around is really problematic. And if it's problematic for able-bodied and people of a working age, imagine how problematic it is for people who are older. Imagine how problematic it is for people who are disabled. But look, they're carers, the people who are professionalised in the space, the economy in general, are all needing these sorts of resources. So our job, in short, is to very much so advocate for and recommend to government, advocate to government about the issues we're finding. We have a very strong direct relationship with the Minister for Regional Development, which is Nola Marino, the Assistant Minister, and then you've got people who look after regional migration like Andrew G, who's very keen to get people from city-based areas out into regional country-based areas, and then even up to the Deputy Prime Minister. So you throw in Alan Tudge, who deals with urban infrastructure. We've got a portfolio of ministers that we can talk to about these issues. I like the fact that we also, today talking in particular because of that high growth of employment prospects and business prospects in the aged care and disability space. Stuart Andrews on the Gold Coast, and so he's sort of down the street, and also Ken Wyatt. So we've got access to a range of ministers, but it's all about Logan and Redlands, and it's all about making sure the infrastructure that underpins whatever business and community groups want to do is there for them. That means telecommunications through to water, sewage. Ridiculous we're still talking about water and sewage supply in an urban area, but we are, as well as the roads, the rail, the other infrastructure. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Gary. Rita, I've got a question for you as a comment and a question. So it's from Simon. Simon saying, thank you, great presentation. I really am interested in measuring innovation and the impact that it might have on the sector. I'm really keen if you had 3 of your top innovations that you feel that our sector should consider.
All right. Firstly, thanks, Simon, for the question and the feedback. It's always hard to know in webinars like this what people are thinking if you can't actually see them. It's probably the bit I miss the most. In terms of the question, firstly to say, well, in terms of measuring innovation, I think it's important that we realize that innovation is actually something that does get measured, and the OECD has some really good guidelines around that. So that's just if you wanted to go into that. What might be innovations in age and healthcare? I think one of the big challenges, as it sort of occurred to me as Anne was talking as well, is integration and seeing that we can solve a problem from multiple different perspectives. So just focusing on, for example, digital adoption is not enough. We need to see how this actually becomes part of someone's life, how the skills that they learn by acquiring digital skills can convert to a number of other areas. So, I mean, I'm really excited to see things like home care robots and home care puppies and all of that, and that looks amazing, but I guess we have to move to what is practically possible in different settings and what can really work on the ground. So there are a lot of amazing innovations around, but until they go mainstream and become affordable and is highly adopted, it's just not accessible. So we have to have a look at what are the particular needs situation that we're working in, and then work with collaborators. So Anne's point about the co-design was really important. I think we find amazing innovations. We simply have to look to Europe, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of companies, research institutes, care providers and software providers that have come together to say how we solve this. So I think it's quite important for us to, and Anne's got some great models because of her collaborative approach. They run through the community resourcing. So I think those of us that want to get together and collaborate, join that expression of interest that happens at the end of the webinar.
Thank you. I've got another question, I think, for all our panelists, and it's from Penny. Penny was saying, thanks for highlighting the wide intersection with other businesses, Gary, in your presentation, and particularly highlighting that age and disability providers and the people that they provide support to have real issues when communities aren't responsive. And you highlighted issues like people having an environment where mobility is reduced, not enhanced. How do you feel, how do the panelists feel about smart cities and smart suburbs agenda? And are there any local examples on the Sunshine Coast or in Logan and Redlands that you would like to highlight as examples of communities getting smarter? Or I guess, have we just started that journey?
Well, I can pile in with a ready example. Yarrabilba is a community immediately to the south of Beenleigh, and for those watching from overseas, that's, you know, an old town that's become now consumed by suburbia. But Yarrabilba is a smart suburb. It's been announced by the Queensland government as a smart suburb. It's got all the high-speed internet connections and all of these great innovations in new housing, and some of it purpose-built for disability access, some of it purpose-built for aged care access. It's got great shopping centres. It's got a lot of things going for it. Yarrabilba, it's a fantastic place. But you can't catch a train there. You can't catch a bus there. And some of the kids that are working in another part of the region that we look after, a place called Capalaba, out by the Bayside, the only way a 16-year-old apprentice, who's, say, working as a trade apprentice on building one of the many new houses, thousands of new houses in this area, can get to Yarrabilba is by getting somebody to give them a lift. And even then, it's a tortured route to get there. If you want to catch public transport, it's a train back into the middle of the city, change trains, and then you catch a train to Beenleigh, and then you put your thumb out and hope that someone will give you a lift, because there's no public transport. So how is that a smart suburb? There is absolutely no point in creating suburbs and environments which are, from a technology point of view, smart and connected if they don't have some of the rudimentary connections. And there are other areas where there are aged care projects in the outer regions of the Logan area and places like Jimboomba, people wanting to build, and rightly so, because, you know, why would you want to build an aged care home away from where people already live? My father's heading into a retirement living environment. He wants to live within the same region that he's always lived in. So he's going a kilometre up the street. Everybody would want to do that, I think, or find a place that they could happily, you know, find. But again, water supply. Is the water supply there? Now you've got to provide tank water in some of these places. Is the sewage there? No, it's septic. This I believe, and I know this is crazy to be talking about it, but how can we have smart suburbs and new and emerging communities that aren't connected to the core infrastructure that people in the inner city, mainly where the planners live, by the way, take for granted? So I think they're big issues, and we've got to keep talking about it.
Thanks, Gary. Reid?
Yeah, so I think my answers don't have the Yarrabilba example, but I would agree with Gary that the issue around the smart cities and smart suburbs have been traditionally approached from a technology point of view. and not really that integrated perspective. And that's one of the biggest challenges we face if we just take a singular sector perspective. We need to have this integrated perspective and to really look at the whole of the design. And that's why my network ecosystem approach was saying, like, you need all of these players to come to the table. On the Sunshine Coast, we do have one of our organizations that supported the script project was called Comlink, and they had a very is headed up by Fida Adra, and was very much focused on more a kind of traditional model of delivery. And they've, in the process, the last 3 years, they've changed their whole model. They're building an integrated village approach that will have more service providers in, and they've even changed their name to Be. But how that will actually play out, I can't tell you, because it is still in the construction phase. And like Gary said, this year upset a lot of the boats that were sort of going along. So we'll have to see how that turns out. But the integrated approach is what I'd love to see happen. And that's what will really make a difference to how people live. You have to look at it from the residents' own experience. We can't impose solutions from outside on the sector.
Thank you. That probably leads nicely into a question from Grace. What do the panelists think? Is it easy for businesses to be innovative in unforeseen circumstances such as COVID, if they are well-established older businesses or if they are new businesses?
You okay if I take that one first, Anne?
I'd really be interested if your research is indicating better positioning. Over to you.
Well, we're doing research in Moreton Bay too that sort of, I guess, can answer this question to some extent. So the first thing I'd say is it easier for businesses to be innovative? No, I think that what makes it easier or not easier is probably the way the business thinks about the innovation. If they are opportunity focused, so they're constantly looking for new opportunities, or whether they see it, oh, I must change because it's a threat. I won't be able to survive. I won't be able to continue. Because businesses who see these things as opportunities are often learning. So they're actually aware of what things they could do. So when something comes around and said, like, say you have to shut down for 2 weeks or whatever, we've seen our innovative businesses actually jump on that and be ready, because they already had projects that they wanted to work on, and now suddenly they have time to turn that into reality. Whereas those that have got no idea just feel like they're stuck and they don't know what to do. And so they kind of spend a lot of time thinking of what to do and then look to competitors. So that's the first part of your question. Then how does age matter, new or established businesses? I think new businesses aren't locked into their business models yet. So it's kind of easier for them to make a change because they find a new market. But if you're an established business, you already have a way that works. And so to go and change that way that works to something unknown, or even split your energies if you're a smaller organization with limited staff, like some trying new things and some doing the old things, is quite a challenge. So that's probably more challenging for established businesses, but we know businesses that survive longer are able to kind of straddle both those worlds, keep on doing the things they were doing well, plus embracing new things and keep on learning and then pursuing those innovations.
Terrific. Gary, did you want to wade in there? Or?
Just, I mean, one of my pet dislikes, hate's too strong a word, are people, I hear it in government, I hear it in large organisations, is we've never done it that way before. And so those sort of people, I think, are always contrary to the times we're in right now. You know, it's important to have that corporate memory, and important, as has just been said, that the things you do well, you should continue to do, and to find ways to perhaps leverage off those things you do well and continue to do to create new ways to do things. But if people in business right now are not thinking about ways to innovate, to revisit, to look at new ways to grow another portion of their business because times have changed, then really, frankly, they're on their way out of business. So they just need to face that reality. They need to be innovative in their thinking, not radical in their changing, but just innovative in their thinking, playing a lot of what ifs, talking to their staff, talking about things the customers are expecting and demanding. And to take a signal in part from last night's budget, I saw some media commentary which suggested that the deficit, the amount of money the government has is going to spend that they're not getting in, the deficit will be the largest since the 1950s. Now, I wasn't alive in the 1950s, but history tells me that it was the staging point of the long, slow boom that benefited us through to the early 70s, so the great oil shock of 1974. This country grew enormously. Our economy grew, our industries grew, our population grew. We became a much talked about nation right around the world. So I feel as much as this coronavirus COVID thing has had almost a warlike depression effect on our economy in the short term, the only way is up, and growth is possible. Government's sending all the right signals. They're releasing money back into your pocket, our pocket, through tax cuts, and that's the only way you can do it. I mean, if government had gone the other way and taxed us more, then the economy would shrink. It all makes sense. So I just hope they deregulate or change some of the regulations to unleash the entrepreneur class, to get them out there to be as innovative as possible. And that means in all sectors. And this aged care sector, this community sector is an ageing workforce that needs innovation, that needs more people with more passion, more ambition, more drive involved. And the time is now. Start planning, I say.
Thank you, Gary. I'm going to lead to the worldwide here. I've got Dr. Malcolm Fisk. Malcolm's presented just on COVID. I think from memory, Malcolm left the Redlands on the 9th of March. We know that well because I think that was just about when we were going into lockdown, and Malcolm went home to Wales and went into lockdown there. Malcolm asked, there is a tendency to think of innovation in relationship to technologies, but what innovations do the panelists consider are most important in regard to the way that home care services are provided? And what does it mean for digital and health literacy for older people that can benefit from such services, and of course that of the home care workforce? So who would like to answer that? Rita? I guess Malcolm's asking a series of questions there around innovation is broader than just technologies, and certainly in the sector I work in, innovations in the way that service models are configured and deployed, as well as workforces. Technology is generally enabler, but if you don't get the service model right or the workforce skilled and trained and literate, nothing's going to be able to be innovated. Any comments from either panelists?
Yeah, I think Malcolm makes a good point. I think technology is often a very tangible thing to see, and so it's easy for us to point to a specific walker or a scooter that a scooter for life. I've seen different products like that, so it's easy. It sort of reflects that my question in the beginning when I was asking people about the products and services. Those are the things that we see, so they are the ones that come most to mind when you think about innovation. But a lot of the real innovations comes from I think user design. So putting yourself in the user's position and experiencing what they experience, and like Gary was saying, then you realize, well, actually it's not the smart home that is the issue. It's moving out of the smart home to access the daily needs and meet with friends and things like that. So I think it's that design mindset is critical when we are looking at innovation, and then what I guess software people would call interoperability. But what we're really talking about here is integration of people coming from very different fields, talking to each other and seeing where there's the overlap and what are the opportunities in this particular sector. So that's sort of where I think a lot of the future innovations will come from, this cross-fertilization across different sectors.
And Anne, I think part of the reality with technology as such is it becomes a sop and a crutch, depending on which way you look at it. It's the number of older Australians who say to me that they keep being told, just go to the website, just go to the website, and they feel a genuine disconnect from services. They feel a disconnect from, you know, government information. It's all on the website. Terms and conditions all on the website. The forms are all on the website. And there are certainly those technology haves and have-nots out there, and there are people who are not wanting to touch technology because it frightens them and they don't understand them. I mean, heavens above, I couldn't find the mute button earlier. I needed a 12-year-old consultant here to handle it, you know. But the reality of it is that technology should not be seen as a way of getting rid of the problem by saying, just go and consult the website. So we still need that personal touch. And frankly, the older you get, I'm sure the more you want and the more vulnerable you are, the more you want to have an integration or an interaction with somebody you can trust. So having that kind of, and dare I say it, if you want to talk about an innovative way of dealing with things, is that constant training, retraining, refashioning. And I think we just have to remind ourselves that we're dealing with people. And we're not just dealing with numbers, and we're not just dealing with people who should be just automatically flicked off to, you know, use your iPad to do this or do that. People still want that touch of people. And one other point I'll make, and maybe it's because of the cultural diversity evident in the area that we look after in Logan and Redlands, but you know, families still want to do things first, and government is not real good at actually resourcing that, even though there is, you know, respite for carers and all those things, and they're all very important. There's still examples of the little old lady who doesn't want anybody but her daughter who's dead on her feet, showering her and looking after her, and doesn't want any strangers in the house. So I think understanding that each caseload, each person, each participant, each client, whatever you want to call them, is different, and having a system that is agile enough is in itself an innovation that we've got to look at, because frankly the ageing in place task in Australia is first rate. To have more people stay at home longer is the reality. We're not going to have institutionalised aged care as the first call for most of us. We can't reach an age like that movie Logan's Run and you're just sent off to be terminated or housed somewhere else. You know, families should be able to have a very big say in this. And having said that, hopefully there's people oversighting the way families do treat their older people. So I just think there's a lot of agility, Anne, and thinking and training associated with that, I think, is a big task that we've got to get our head around. And I think that is, dare I say it, a big economic opportunity for people who want to be innovative in their agility training in this space.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Rita. The next question is, I think, for you, Rita. It's from Steve McDonald, who Gary knows well as the CEO of RDA Redlands Logan. And Steve is asking, is there a set of common market, including regulatory characteristics, in which innovation is more likely to thrive?
Right, that's an interesting question, because we tend to get different types of innovation depending on the economic conditions. So economic conditions do play a role, and we're probably in the slump or a recession sort of situation that's been induced by COVID now, and it's interesting because it's worldwide, but like Gary said, the only way from here is up. So the types of innovations that we get in this current climate is often those ones that are quick and easy wins, which in other words can provide a lot of value. So it means re-looking at what we are providing and saying, which of these things that we're doing can we stop doing because they actually make no matter at all to the person who's supposed to benefit from it, to our administration. So kind of simplify the back-end bureaucracy of that. And what is it that is really providing a benefit to people, and what can we do more of that will increase the value? So looking at value innovations in an economic downturn is a really good way to go. in an economic upturn, there tends to be more investment. But I think the danger of saying, well, we will wait for better times until we invest in things.
Yep.
If we're facing an aging population, there is no way we can do that. We can't responsibly say we can wait. So we still have to pick our projects. We probably sit with limited resources at the moment. So collaboration actually makes a lot of sense from different parties that pool their resources together to solve a common problem and bring different perspectives.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions here from my colleague from the Aged Care Industry Technology Council, Rod Young. Rod's asking, what place does risk capital funding and accelerators have for early stage innovations? And how do you create an ecosystem of innovation? Is that a question for you, Rita, I think, from your research?
Yeah, so the first one I'll take around the idea of the risk capital. I think good ideas with potential for growth are things that attract risk capital. So I think the Neighbourhoods of the Future report, which I referred to earlier, actually took a look at the finance industry and the different models they would use to incentivize investment and also social investment. So around risk capital, I think if the drivers and benefits are right, the right sort of ideas are attractive. Possibly in Australia, we may not be so used to funding those kind of ideas, but there's a lot of angel networks that have come about in the last, probably since Malcolm Turnbull's announcement of the ideas boom, whether people liked it or not, but there's a lot more that has been done in that space. So it is about, and also people who typically invest in property, to have them see that aged care properties that are properly integrated is still a great investment opportunity. So kind of making the investment and angel networks aware of the opportunities to be realized. As Rod's mentioned around accelerators and so forth, all of these things tend to take time. So you have to need to realize that they don't pay off immediately. But if you put a number of cohorts through an accelerator program, they start to form a community over time. And it's often a year or two later that you start to see those benefits realized and the networks formed really strengthened to make a difference in a community. There is some investment in capability building around accelerators. The ecosystem question, again, is a longer term. I think you've mentioned the Regional Innovation Program as well in your region. I think there's the biggest challenge for us is to leverage what has been created in all the different regions around Queensland for the future. And the idea of ecosystems is really to be self-organizing. So we've had a lot of support from Advanced Queensland, but it's important for regions to come back and say, well, these are the opportunities we'd like to embrace next, whoever the government turns out to be. It's my 2 cents worth.
Right. Another question from Rod that I might give to you, Gary. He's asking, why is the disability and aged care sectors often really firmly placed in not-for-profit sectors and not seen as a credible growth and particularly as a credible export industry? He comments that we could be a global leader in the provision of export services, particularly to Southeast Asia.
Well, I think there are already some grass shoots of that because people taking the Australian example here with the cultural temperament of Southeast Asian countries. I know of one chap who's a Malaysian-born Australian citizen who innovated in a retirement village, which then morphed in part to a nursing home in the region some years ago. I remember I was there for the opening when I, in a previous guise as a federal member, federal minister. And look, his particular model, using Buddhist principles, and people who are not Buddhist can still go there, providing they I'd expect you to have a steak for dinner every night. That's a pretty good place to be. The model has been so well regarded by Malaysian investors that he's now opened up a network of similar homes using those Australian standards in Malaysia. So, you know, it's already some grassroots examples. That's come out of the Logan region. I simply make that point. So look, I think we should be and could be, but, you know, what sector are we talking about? That's the question. And I think, yes, there is this community-based sector, which is enormously important. There's a lot of churches that are involved in it. That is enormously important. And it's the history of the sector. Some of them are good at this, and some of them, well, others have got a different view, and we see and hear that. Some of them build around, as I said, their religion. Some allow certain participants in, and some allow certain participants not to come in. And then you've got the private sector that have bought in on the space as well. But there's another group, and that is the family-based sector that is you know, building the granny flat, providing the extra resources, living in with the elderly parents, creating a family network that sort of hovers around mum or dad in their later years. So there is a variety of sectors at work here. I don't know whether they're all as well linked as they should be. And I think there is some suspicion from different elements within the sector of other elements in the sector. So we have a bit of a disparate kind of an almost antagonistic sector. And if you want to deal with it honestly, I'm saying to you, I don't think the collaboration is as good as it should be within the sector. But I think Rod's ambition is right. We have a story we can sell to other places because we do it better than others. But I think we should be also very hard on ourselves and demanding we can do it better here as well, and resourcing some of those family-based sectors a bit better, understanding their needs a bit better, and not being afraid to really come down hard on those who are letting the whole sector down and shutting down operators who do the wrong thing. And there's been some political reluctance to do that, but I think it's important that we do, because you know, we're only as good as the weakest link in the chain, and there's a lot of different links in this chain.
Thank you. Rita, any comments?
Yeah, well, I'd just say one of the organizations I'm working with in Bundaberg, CLS Community Solutions, have actually found it themselves faced with the same issue that Rod just raised when the NDIS came about. And they're also, as you might know, they're very keen on using technologies and so forth to solve issues in the sector. And in their case, they found that for their employees, it was best to create a separate social enterprise where they were able to work on the innovations separately and have the non-profit sort of sitting side by side, because they found that some of their employees were just not able to transition with that kind of mindset. So there are internal challenges as well as external challenges to the question of why is disability seen as a non-profit. It's kind of a heritage effect that we carry over from where the past was, but there is a need for transformation to the future.
And I need to correct my questioner there. Sorry, Pete. The questioner for those two questions was indeed Pete Horsley. So thank you, Pete. I'm going to finish it in one last question, and it's from Tiana, who's currently a student but very interested in this area when she graduates. And it's I think it's a good question to finish on. How do you find opportunities for innovation, and how can you convince others to partner with you on new innovation projects? Rita, over to you first.
All right, so I think the co-design and that you mentioned earlier is one of those first ways to go about solving this issue. You've talked about the home and community care before as hack when you started off your presentations. In the innovation space, hacking events are often where we pose a challenge to a community and invite quite a lot of diverse players together to come and solve those issues. I think that works quite well. It brings very different people together with different perspectives to work on problems and trial solutions and then present those solutions together. So That's a great way to bring people together. Of course, there's different models around accelerating innovation that we can bring into this, such as incubator and accelerator programs as well. So I think there's a lot of tools out there that's being used in other sectors. The biggest challenge for us is that we use the sort of language that will actually resonate with people in the aged care industry, so that we don't alienate them. It's one of the challenges that the KPMG report identifies as well, is that we sometimes in different sectors speak different languages, and that's what sometimes makes it challenging to find common ground, even though we share very similar aspirations.
And I put a plug in there, Tiana and others, to join our Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative, but also to join the work of groups like the Australian Aged Care Industry Technology Council, who really are trying unitedly to address some of these issues and provide platforms for collaboration and partnerships. Gary, any last comments from you?
Well, and all I'll say to Tiana is, if she's got a way of building a better mousetrap, keep it to herself and don't tell too many people, even though we want to collaborate, because, you know, there's money to be made. Can I be that blunt? If she's got a better idea, people will beat a path to a door, if you understand the mousetrap analogy, Tiana. If you build a better mousetrap, people will build a path to your door. But look, I think it's important for you to learn to ask questions, and that's where the collaborations are critically important, to look at people who are experienced in the space, but don't be distracted or dissuaded that you might have a better idea. And the reason I say that is, in my mind, is somebody I've known for about 20 years, herself a refugee migrant to Australia, and who saw a need in the NDIS space that she felt she could offer, and she started up her own business. So she's now getting clients and building a business around what she thinks is a unique, boutique, bespoke or tailored range of services. Yippee. I mean, that is fantastic. If she, and I say this quite directly, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but, you know, the trouble is that she may have gone there as a literal babe in the woods and be told by others who'd been around before, we've never done it that way before, and killed her off. So she hit a few of those brick walls and decided she was going to go and prove it to herself. So, you know, feel upbeat and optimistic. This is a growth area of Australian industry and economic need, in part because there are people who could be, once they receive services and support, go on and be economic contributors in their own right to our economy. But it's not just about economy, it's still about that human level of care and interacting with people. And so there's a lot of big pluses in this space, and isn't it great a younger person wants to be involved? Yippee, I think go for it.
Thanks, Gary. Look, we're just about at the end of today's presentation. On the board there, on the slide there now, is the contacts for all the presenters and their entities that we've discussed. I know that the three presenters, including myself today, are all passionate about regional opportunities, and we believe that this might be the first in a series of industry workshops. I know that RDA is very interested in holding further workshops in education and training, which crosses those sectors in health and community care, as well as construction, and two major issues for that region. I know that Rita in her research is very interested in hearing from other regions, from individuals and organisations who are really interested in benchmarking and gaining some more evidence. So stay in touch, be in touch through our regular mail outs and opportunities. We will be sending everyone today an evaluation and the opportunity to express their interest in joining other activities that collaboratively the three entities or three presenters have talked about today. But also individually, I know that Regional Development Australia is very interested in this agenda, that that University of the Sunshine Coast and the work that Rita's doing in research and really leading the way here, and the work that we're interested in through the Australian Aged Care Industry Technology Council, the Community Care Collaborative, and also through the research we do at Community Resourcing. So thanks everyone. It's been a great group today from all around the world. It's a great opportunity to discuss impactful innovation, and hopefully we'll have many other opportunities. Please join us in thanking particularly our two presenters here today, Gary Hargraves and Rita de Villiers-Skeepers, who have done great presentations, diverse. So thanks everyone, stay in touch.